Good morning, all. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Raisa Rodriguez, Chief Program and Policy Officer at FPWA. We welcome our nonprofit partners, faith leaders, stakeholders to our series of virtual conversations with women in power within New York City government in commemoration of Women's History Month. For 100 years, FPWA has served its membership network and New Yorkers at large with a laser focus on achieving racial and economic justice, strengthening low-income communities, and eliminating barriers to upward mobility. We foster economic equity in three critical ways: advocating for policy changes that improve the lives of millions of New Yorkers, supporting nonprofits with capacity building supports to better meet community needs, and strengthening individuals and families with targeted financial supports. During our Hour of Power conversations, we will hear from three powerful women leading New York City in the Adams administration. Today, we'll hear an intimate conversation between our president and CEO, Jennifer Jones-Austin, and New York City's Deputy Mayor for Strategic Initiatives, Ms. Sheena Wright. While we will hear from three New York City women leaders in position of power, sharing their personal journeys and their vision for an equitable New York City recovery, we do so while being incredibly mindful of the immeasurable role women in New York play day in and day out. They are our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, paving the way in households that face economic and housing insecurity, doing essential work even before a pandemic and economic crisis that brought us to our knees, and fighting each day to make ends meet. Thank you again for joining us for these powerful conversations. Jennifer, I'll turn it to you.
All righty. Good morning, everybody. And let me just first say that I'm excited that you're joining us for what I believe is going to be a really rich and informative conversation. You're going to have to excuse me because I feel a little giddy. I feel a little excited, or maybe very excited. Yesterday, I watched Ketanji Brown Jackson for a short while as she held it down at the Senate. And this morning, I'm going to get to have a conversation with another woman who is holding it down. And so that's why I'm a little giddy. I'm a little excited. I have to try my best not to be informal, because I think of her as my sister in the fight, my sister in the struggle. She's been holding it down for better than 20 years, a 20-year career in public service. And prior to that, her journey to get into public service, she's phenomenal. She's a phenomenal woman who holds it down at every turn. She is Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, and she is leading in impactful ways. And so we're going to talk with her. We're going to talk about her life and her journey. We're going to talk about her vision for New York City. And we're going to talk about ways that we can be helpful to her as she does the work that impacts us all. So excited to have you with us, Deputy Mayor Wright. And again, forgive me if I slip a few times. I'm a little giddy, a little excited to have you here.
Jennifer, if we are not going to be informal, I don't know. We are. And I'm giddy just to always be in the space with you and who you are and all you've done. So I'm looking forward to having some fun in this conversation this morning.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's get started. And first, let's talk about your journey, because people look at persons like yourself and they're like, she is phenomenal. And, did she check all the boxes? Did she do it her way? Did she do it the way that others told her to do it? What were the steps that she took? And people can look at your resume. They can read your bio. You're all over the place in terms of write-ups about you and all the impactful work that you've done. But sometimes people don't know, what are those kind of footnotes or those things that happened along the way that positioned you, put you here, put you there, that made you think about a career in public service. So tell us a little bit about that aspect of your journey.
Sure. And I mean, and my mother, Fraser House.
The music, like the kind of like church music came on when you called Mama out.
That's right. So, she was, certainly a public service heroine in terms of the work that she's done and the very impactful career. And she got on that journey. She started out really through her lived experience, right? She was a teenage mom. She had my sister when she was 15 and me when she was 17, very young, and really relied on the support, right, from many of the nonprofit sector, the faith community, to help her go on her path to achieve her full potential, as well as her daughters, her girls. And so, she really became legendary in that space, really, helping other young women who were teenage moms kind of redirect their lives, and then got very involved in the HIV/AIDS pandemic in the early 80s, and is really a legend in public health. So just watching her career and all of the amazing women that helped her along the way, like Ma Dukes, right? I was just talking the other day about Harriet Michelle, the first woman to lead the New York Urban League. I was certainly drawn to that work. However, I went to law school, which a lot of people do, because when they not exactly sure what to do, right? And you don't know what the path is. And so that kind of footnote was like, I was following the herd. I just said, it won't be bad to have a law degree, and it might be helpful. But while I was in law school, I really got exposed for the first time in my life to the corporate sector and the business community. As I said, my mom was a social justice warrior. We didn't grow up with, the Wall Street Journal on the coffee table, not even Black enterprise, right? It was all about the social justice work. And Columbia Law School is a very business focus. And as I learned more about that world and that space, and I got an opportunity to either go to a very prestigious law firm or to work at the Legal Aid Society, where I had worked for a summer after I got out of law school, I went to my mom and I asked her, what do you think I should do? And she said, you should go to that law firm. And she said, you should go to that law firm. And it wasn't just because I had a lot of student loans, because law school is expensive. I think I'm still paying them all. But she said, you should go to that law firm because there are things that you can get from that experience if you want to do this work and bring to this work. But she also said, there are things that you need to bring to that law firm, because I'm sure they have not had someone quite like you. And she was right? I was the second Black woman in the history of the firm to work there as a lawyer. And I did bring a lot to that space in terms of their understanding and experience of Black women and women of color, but also got a lot from that as well, and really learned and really kind of started to forge my path, really focus on economic empowerment for communities like the community I grew up in and where I live in. I grew up in the South Bronx. I live in Harlem. And then I ran the Community and Economic Development Corporation for a decade, Abyssinian Development Corporation, before going to United Way for almost a decade. But it was great to open up and expose myself to things that I was not as familiar with. And it was so additive to my journey, as well as, like I said, always remembering what you're bringing to the table, whatever table you sit, wherever you.
Can we lean in there, just how powerful that is, especially at the beginning of your journey, your career journey, to be reminded that you have something to offer, and you move into this space, even if it's unfamiliar, because women, and especially women of color, are often engaged with as though, like we should be happy just to be at the table, and as though like we've been invited in and now we're going to get to learn something, and we're not coming with something. And so if you could just like talk a little bit more about that, about what that did for you, what that meant in terms of then how you showed up then, and just kind of how you've shown up since.
I think, I like you, Jennifer, was always poured into us who we were and whose we were. So I never had a sense that I was lucky to be at the table. My seat was always earned, certainly by the people that came before me and by me. And I always appreciated, and because it was just poured into me. you know, and I think it's so important what we tell our children about who they are and whose they are. So, you know, I grew up in the South Bronx. My mother was a teenage mother. You know, there was financial struggle and a lot of other struggle. But I also knew that there was a real asset and gift in my South Bronx community, in my single-headed household. And so I went to actually to boarding school in high school, and it was the first time I actually had been around a lot of white people. You know, I grew up in the South Bronx, went to elementary, middle school in the Bronx, and got a full scholarship to go to this high school. But I was so rooted and clear about who I was and whose I was. And I remember, and this is one of those footnotes, as you say in the story, one of my classmates, and this was my freshman years, white guy, and I've told this story, but it is, I remember it. It made an impact. White classmate, nice guy, but he said to me, he said, Sheena, because he, you know, again, I was one of 8 Black students in the whole school. He said, you're Black, you're a woman, and you're from the South Bronx. He said, isn't that like having 3 strikes? And I said, 3 strikes? Like, I don't know that much about sports, but, you know, did grow up near Yankee Stadium. But I said, 3 strikes? Wouldn't that mean like I'm out? I said, if I have 3 strikes, how come I'm the captain of the cross country team, the top of my class, you know, leading in student, you know, associations? I said, maybe being Black and a woman from the South Bronx, maybe those are strengths. Those are assets. Maybe, you know, and so appreciating that always, what people will see as liabilities and underestimate you, appreciate the superpower in all of that. And, you know, when I, you know, I know we're all like pulling our hair out as we're watching our sister Ketanji listen to the foolishness, right? And, you know, you see her and you know, she wants to say, have several seats, all of y'all.
Yes.
You can't even light a candle.
Not
People want to know where her
they can't even find the match.
Can't find the match. Want to know what her LSAT scores are. And I want her to say, could somebody spell LSAT? Could you spell that? Somebody? Come on.
Oof. But it's a constant.
In any arena. And appreciating that is important, and knowing that, because society is going to tell you at every turn that it's not true and that those are liabilities. But you have to know the truth.
Right. I remember the ACS commissioner, Nicholas Scapetta, went on to become fire commissioner. He served as the head of the Department of Investigation, all under different mayors. He grew up in foster care, and he once said that people would say to him, wow, it's amazing all that you've accomplished despite your circumstances. And he would say, no, it's not despite my circumstances. It's because of my circumstances.
Right.
He'd say, I am who I am, not despite my circumstances. I am who I am because of my circumstances. And so when you determined to make the transition from, you know, from private sector, then into the nonprofit sector, and then now into government, as deputy mayor, this is your first stint in government, right?
It is.
So tell us about like that jump, and you know, and I mean, like, you're doing the work. You stepped in big time, right? Tell us, what is the inspiration behind it?
Well, you know, I think as I think about the journey and the foundation that I had in the corporate sector, and really understanding money and power, right? And then going into a community-based organization where I deeply appreciated the intersectionality of it all, right? You can't just focus on education and not appreciate the impact that health has, and housing, and economic mobility, right? That families are experiencing all the things, and that the solutions need to be aligned and coordinated in order to have maximum impact. And then going, and I remember being at the Abyssinia Development Corporation, and you're really on the ground, like fighting battles. And I remember we were working hard to preserve and redevelop a housing unit, a housing complex that was just really challenged. And it mean residents came to us because they were being harassed by the owner and living in just absolute unlivable conditions. And we went and we fought, and it took us about 3 years to acquire the building and win the fight and start to make the improvements. And in that 3-year time period, and this was about a 230 unit complex, Harlem lost about 5,000 units of affordable housing. And I thought, Lord, we are winning battles, but we're losing the war. Mm. And then the step to the United Way is where I saw more, that was the war table, where you can look out and think more broadly and strategically across sectors. So it was about putting the nonprofit, the corporate, and government really trying to work together, again, to we call, we talk about wraparound, but doing the wrapping and the knitting of all the sectors. And that was great. But also, even though it was a large nonprofit, it was kind of a drop in the bucket to government, right? Government is the ultimate scale. And New York City government is the ultimate scale if you really want to have change. And it's such an exciting time, I think, with this new administration, with our Mayor Adams, with the vision, the bold vision that he has for the city that we all share, the kind of energy and enthusiasm and experiences, right? There's so many people that have come into this space, all these phenomenal women, right? With this lived experience and professional experience that, if we can make the bold, significant changes that we want to make in this city, we've changed the world.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What we do here, people pay attention to.
Right.
What's that line? If I can make it here, I can make it anywhere. If we can do it here, we can do it anywhere. Right. So you put together the administration, and there's some phenomenal, many phenomenal individuals like yourself in the administration. What were you, when you were centering on helping our mayor to build out this new leadership team, what were the values that you were seeking in each of the individuals in these very critical roles?
Well, first of all, it was an incredible opportunity and experience to be the chair of the transition. I got to meet thousands of people, who are so much skill and enthusiasm. And so what I mean, the baseline was that you have to have really strong, like, technical skills for the role, right? You've got to know how to run and have some knowledge, right? Some subject matter expertise in the work. But that's a commodity. Lots of people have that. Mm-hmm. Some of the values that were really important in this administration is the ability the value of curiosity. Mm-hmm. To be able to think outside the box is very important for this administration. Think about how we can do things differently, because quite frankly, the way that they have been done hasn't certainly produced the results that we want to achieve as administration. So that's one. The value of having a network mindset. The mayor was so clear. He's like, our agencies and our government work in a silo. If there's some people that are excellent. If you like command and control, I have my, bump, 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 people report to me, I tell them what to do. But you have to have the ability to kind of lift your head up and look across at your peers and connect and align and coordinate. That's a whole different skill.
And not often exercised, not one that you see in government. People get in there and they get laser focused, like, this is what I do and this is only what I do. Oh, that's not my mission. That's not in my portfolio. Right.
And then I would say the third thing is a learning mindset. That curiosity will lead you to have some bumps in the road. And you have to have a mindset where you're not going to kind of castigate yourself or others for stumbles, but say, all right, that didn't work.
Like that.
There's a lot at stake, but what do we learn from that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are the three things that were really important to kind of suss out as part of the process.
And that's critical because you, in centering on those values, you develop an appreciation for who people are as individuals and how they're going to lead and how they're going to drive, how they're going to be as
Yes.
team members, which is so critical to leadership and getting things done. Tell us about your portfolio. You are leading, like the top initiatives for the mayor. You have his right ear, you have his left ear. You're walking with him. So we're very curious about your portfolio and the vision that you have for yourself in this space and for what you'll achieve.
Yes. So, and strategic initiatives is a great kind of body of work, and generally, I think in the administration and some of my predecessors in the space, I respect a lot, like Rich Bury and Phil Thompson, really brilliant leaders. And what we are doing and how we're looking at it, as you said, it's what are the strategic priorities of the administration that require cross agency and cross-sector collaboration in order to get it done. So there are things that are critically important for our recovery coming out of COVID-19 that have to be accomplished and achieved, and not one agency owns it. And not one sector owns it. You need the government, you need the nonprofit sector, and you need the corporate sector and the business community, the philanthropic sector. So those things are things like childcare. We know we can't get our economy back going without really dramatically expanding access to quality, affordable, accessible childcare. And I know a lot of certainly your organizations that you work with are in that space. And we know that it's the Administration for Children's Services, it's the Department of Education, it's the Department of Buildings, it's Economic Development Corporation, as well as the nonprofit sector, as well as the private sector who cares about it, right, for their employees and private providers. And so my unit is really focused on bringing all of that together and building an executable plan that is going to dramatically increase quality, accessibility for the city of New York. So that's one example. Now we're dealing with gun violence. There's a law enforcement, but there's, as the mayor says, upstream, right? There are the interventions and the preventative measures that we need to take to make sure that our young people are growing up in healthy spaces. Gun violence impact, you need every agency in the city of New York leaning in on that. Even sanitation, the Department of Education, on and on, DYCD, the Department of Youth and Community Development. And so how are we kind of leaning in collaboratively in that space is another big one. So there are about a half a dozen at a time that we're working on. Another big part of my portfolio is strategic partnerships. We know the nonprofit sector is an invaluable and indispensable partner of government, not vendors, partners. So part of what we're doing is building a mayor's office of nonprofits to really have an appropriate level of engagement with our nonprofit partners, fixing the procurement process, which is broken, so that we're not like forcing our nonprofits to work for years without being appropriately compensated. Making sure that we're building capacity, particularly of our BIPOC, our Black, Indigenous, and people of color led organizations. So the nonprofit sector is critically important. And so we're really building some muscle to better engage across all our agencies. The other sector in terms of strategic partnerships is philanthropy. I mean, we have to engage strategically with the philanthropic sector. not, little kind of touch points here and there. And in the corporate sector, this mayor and this administration appreciates that the business community and the corporate sector are also indispensable partners. And we have to build the muscle to really engage with them as partners, let them know this is our agenda, this is what we need from you, and to really, in an organized, in an aligned way, connect the dots to get done what we need to get done for our city.
The two thoughts come to mind. I want to lean in a little bit more on nonprofits, but I just have to say that as I listen to you, I'm reminded of the words of Anna Julia Cooper, who was the fourth woman, African-American woman, to earn a PhD in education. She was an educator and a scholar. And she, and I often think of her and sometimes quote her, she said, "Only the Black woman can say when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence and without suing or special patronage. Then and there, the whole race enters with me." And she was talking about how, when we center on the experiences of, like the community, the Black woman, has a handle on what's going on, experiencing the double oppression of being woman and being of color, of having to raise children in marginalized and oppressed states, the experience of like being connected with Black men. And so as I listen to you and I hear you talk about all of these intersectional issues and the importance of looking at the work in your portfolio across all departments, all agencies, you are speaking, and you are living, out what Anna Julia Cooper was talking about. You're looking at it all and you're connected to it all. And I just can't help but think about how your work from the private sector to Abyssinian Development Corporation and then United Way just, gave you so much perspective that you're now bringing into this role. And I'm getting excited about it. I'm really getting excited about it because I think that you have an appreciation, especially for the nonprofits and how hard our work is. Yes, we've been challenged. We were challenged, frankly, for the last, I'd say like nearly 30 years. Lots of loss of funding from the state and from the local governments, going back to the Bloomberg administration. And then de Blasio centered on initiatives that were important to him, but not necessarily always engaging on the issues that were important to the nonprofit sector on the whole. So when you talk about partnership, I think many of us who are listening in are getting excited. And I would just love for you to share, like, as you think about the Office of Nonprofits, what are ways that, maybe you're beginning to envision what partnership looks like?
Well, I think, partnership is about being in relationship, right? And it really starts with respect. Mm. Like you said, there is such a deep appreciation that I have and other deputy mayors have for the work of nonprofits. Like the city doesn't function without nonprofits, right? And nonprofits do the work with limited resources, under lots of stress and strain, and do incredible things, right? And so that appreciation is the foundation for the relationship and the building of partnership. So coming to that, and nonprofits, one of the biggest issues, with respect, is paying people appropriately on time. Basic. That's disrespectful. Like, we gotta fix that. And not only is it disrespectful, it's like how we're disabling a whole industry from doing what we desperately need them to do. Right. So that's kind of a baseline. We have other vendors that we do kind of as well have challenges with, but they have lines of credit, they have reserves, they're much bigger entities and institutions, and could weather the challenge of being in relationship with government. So that's one thing. And we're building the office and we want to really hear from nonprofits. We're doing user-centered design. in all of the experiences that people have had with government, what do you need us to be? How do you need us to show up? What are the things that we need to do to enable your productivity and support your work? And then we want to really look at the nonprofits that have been shut out of the relationship and the partnership with government. And I know you've done a lot of work around that, and Arva Rice has done a lot of work around that. The smaller organizations that are typically run and led by people of color, women of color, who it's just impossible, but are doing critically important work. They're doing the incredibly necessary work on the front lines that we need them to do on a shoestring and a prayer.
I sometimes wonder, and I'd love your thoughts about this. We live in a racist society, and every pillar of our society, racism pervades every pillar of our society. We often talk about racism in policing. Most often, we talk about racism in education, but I don't think we talk enough about racism in human services and in the system that essentially envelops human services. I've sometimes wondered, and I haven't talked about this maybe publicly, but I've sometimes wondered if the treatment of nonprofits, the failure to pay promptly and to pay fairly, is that because the nonprofits are caring for, in the main, the marginalized and the oppressed? And so it's kind of we think less of them, the people they care for as a society. So we think less of the nonprofits who care for them. We don't have to, show up in the right ways for the nonprofits because we really don't care about the people for whom they care. I'd love your thoughts about that, especially as I know that you're concerned, and one of your central focal points is equity and how to advance equity in this government. I think I think that the treatment of nonprofits is tied to the people for whom they care, and the fact that society, on the whole, like the norm has been, we don't think that these people are worthy. So are the nonprofits who care for them less worthy as well?
No, I've learned a long time ago, people talk about the system is broken. The system is broken. System's not broken. The system is designed and built to produce the results that we have. So the inequitable results are by design, right? And my major was American history and went, to Columbia. And when you think about and understand the trajectory and the history of our country, and then you want to answer the question, why do we have all of these disparities in terms of outcomes? Because we have disparities in terms of opportunity, and that's built into who we are at every level, whether it's the business community, whether it's the philanthropic community, the corporate community, the government, nonprofit. That's what it is designed to do. And so if you don't acknowledge that, then you think, well, you're treating symptoms here and there, and not, certainly we always talk about what the root cause is. So it is important to appreciate and understand that, yes, poverty and race is by design. I mean, we understand redlining and denying of opportunity and resources, and yes, 400 years of slavery, what results it's produced, and even look at, the history. We know our history.
Right.
So the treatment of, yes, nonprofits who are addressing the symptoms often of this legacy is not something that is a priority for investment and strengthening.
As I listen to you, and I begin to smile, it's like I can't help but smile, because we have now in you and working with you an opportunity to essentially, flip that and turn the page. and appreciate nonprofits for what they do and the role that they can, if supported, and the role that they strive to play, but if they're better supported, definitely will help play in advancing and achieving equity. And equity is part of your portfolio too. I mean, like, I'm excited, serving on the Racial Justice Commission, that I get to work with and partner with you and your team as we move to the finish line come November in advancing the racial justice ballot measures that'll be on the general election. But overall, you've come in with this mindset of advancing equity. Is that fair?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do want to say one more thing just about nonprofits. What I also appreciate is that nonprofits have to see themselves differently as well. When I started from the corporate sector and I started in the nonprofit at a community development corporation, I, very kind of eagerly took my little notepad and I went around and I met with all of the leaders of community development corporations around the city. And I was like, what do I need to know? Help me learn. Like, I've never done this before. I'm trying to step into this role. And I was surprised that I got very little. Like, people really, they were very polite, but they didn't really tell me very much. So I got to one leader and she said to me, she says, Sheena, why would I tell you kind of like all the ways to do things? She said, you come from the corporate sector. Those are like trade secrets. We're going to be competing for resources. That's what she said. And I thought to myself, and I said to her, I said, well, very naively, I said, well, what business are you in?
Mm.
Are you in the business of advancing your institution? Are you in the business of doing the work in the community for the people?
Mm.
There is another body of work that we need to ensure that nonprofits are doing as well. It's not about institutional advancement.
Mm.
And it's about centering the people in the communities that they're in service to. So there's, you talk about equity.
Wow.
There's work to do there. But yes, equity, I mean, you talked about the intersectionalities, right? It's central to who I am. And I'm so excited that we have the second mayor of color in the history of New York. That's a long time. And this mayor and this administration is focused on making sure that inequities experienced by many segments of the population, Black, Brown, Asian brother and sisters, our LGBTQ+, the Muslim community, other communities, that we really confront, address, redress all those things really with urgency in the work.
There are many pearls of wisdom that you're dropping this morning. And for me, there are going to be many takeaways. I think just in this very moment, what I'm centering on is that we have in this administration, in the leaders, and I'm just going to say in this moment, just looking at you and appreciating you, we have people who are centering on the people. I think you said a word when you talked about the importance of nonprofits centering on the people. That's going to hold true, I believe, under your leadership in this administration, the centering on the people of New York City and the people who are greatly in need. We're just about out of time. This has been dynamic, and my fervent hope is that we have an opportunity, maybe in about 6 months, let's get back together and talk about some of the things that you're doing. Before you leave us, before we leave everyone, I'd love to, in this, as we begin to wrap up Women's History Month, just tell us that if you looked back over your life and you were sitting with rising leaders, is there anything that stands out about your journey, what you've learned, anything that you might have done differently, or anything that you're glad that you did, somebody you met along the way? What is like something that you want to leave us with, especially women, as we are soldiering on?
Have mercy. Well, I think, certainly as women, like you talk about the intersection, we've got a lot of balls to juggle always. And I think as I look back, I feel like I was always in a hurry. I was just like rushing from one thing to the next thing and trying to do this. And my advice to my younger self, and what I would say to younger women who are on the path, is pause and celebrate. Like really spend the time to reflect, like, oh, that I did that. That was good. And enjoy the journey. Don't be in such a hurry. Because I think we're in such a hurry because there's so many things to do and get done. And we're, stretched and strapped, but that is something that I'm trying to learn to do more and better. Not really succeeding, but at least I tell it to myself. I acknowledge it and say it out loud. But that's I think is important.
So I'm gonna it's like the mantra, like or the Sheena Wright isn't is like, don't be in a hurry. Pause and enjoy the journey. I got it. I love it, and just really appreciate you. Excited about all that you're doing, and this moment is pregnant with possibilities, and just glad to have you delivering for us. And so again, we'll come back together maybe and just catch up, but thank you for leading, thank you for serving, and thank you for taking the time to be with us and share with us. Really appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jennifer, and I love you, and you're incredible,
you.
and appreciate you.
And your mama poured into you, and she's poured into me time and time again. Thanks for sharing her with us.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.